Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Leica Street Photography Collective. I'm Ricky, and today's guest is Charles Davis Smith. So once again, thank you for taking the time out of your day, giving a listener something to listen to. I appreciate it, and they appreciate it as well. Been getting a lot of welcome back messages for these one-on-one conversations, which I am going to start resuming recording once again. So I appreciate your time. Please introduce yourself, where you're at, where you've been, what you do, anything you'd like the world to know.
Hi, Ricky. Thank you for having me. I'm Charles Davis Smith. I'm a Dallas-based photographer. I've been doing architectural photography for 30 years. Registered architect. Got my master's degree in architecture with a specialization in historic preservation. And one of the assignments, if you go through the program, is learning how to document historic buildings through drawings, as well as doing research and as well as doing photography. And that's how I really got hooked into photographing buildings. Spent a few years practicing. I interned for a few firms in Dallas and got my license. Practiced briefly, but had always been doing photography as a kind of a part-time hobby. Started shooting for other firms and stuff getting published, and eventually just went out on my own. And I've been doing it. This will be my 30th year.
Okay.
Doing this full time. So lots of fun.
Yeah, that's a very healthy photography journey and career altogether. I do have to say, I believe you are the first, I'm going to say, like, dedicated architect photographer that I've spoken to here. I've spoke with like Urbex, Travelers, Gary Buzel is one that just comes to mind. He travels the west side of the States, just looking for random locations that are ghost towns, basically. So probably similar but different. Same but different. I do got some questions for architect photography, and I'd like to know why it is so important that the lines are perfectly straight.
Well, the architects, they basically hire me to document their building, best represent it, and they want it accurate. And back when I started, which was film days, you either had to shoot with a 4x5 or you could shoot with a 35 millimeter or like a Canon camera. I think they made a perspective lens back then. I shot Nikon and eventually switched to Canon. I think Olympus may have made a perspective lens back then. But they want it to be best represented. So when they get published or when they submit for design awards, all the proportions look right. So it's all about proportion and angles and things like that. So if you're shooting a building that has angles, that's a little bit more, got some like forgiveness. So you'll see a lot of my work with 1 point, and yes, lines need to be straight. Straight when they're straight in real life. So anyway, it's a very structured profession. I'm not a portrait guy, never claimed to be. So buildings basically sit there, and you've got to figure out what's the best time of day to shoot, or best time of year even. It's not always a day in and day out. So best sun angle, sun changes throughout the year. So, it's just something you pick up over time with experience. Architecture training, like we actually have to take a class in sun angles. And that I really was taught a lot on different times of the year and how to design buildings with sun shelves or sunscreens, and what time of year do you want sun to come in those windows, and what time do you want them to block out, so you know how deep to make your sun wells, things like that. So it's all a structured, and of course now it's all done with apps. So I use a Sun Angle app that is probably my most used tool, and it's just on my iPhone. It's called Sunseeker.
I'm going to write this down.
And it's a great tool. It's Sunseeker. If you buy the full version, which is still really cheap, then it will allow you to do a 3-dimensional version. You can open the 3D setting and point towards your building, and you will see all these lines that will tell you where the sun is on that particular day, or where the sun will be 6 months from now. And so that is a very good tool that I like to share with the architects. So I get a lot of architects that want to photograph north-facing buildings in the wintertime. And of course, it never gets sunlight down here in Texas this time of year. But there are things you can do in the wintertime or in the winter months. So dusk shots are always a plus.
Yeah. So. The temperature, like the actual temperature, not lighting temperature, it produces different color lights, if I'm recalling this information correctly. And I think it's because of the natural gases in the air and how it's refracted. Does that sound accurate to you?
Sort of. Yes. Well, I think the atmosphere definitely will affect the light. Mm-hmm. I'm in Texas, so there are days where we'll have sun, but we'll have winds that blow in a lot of dust from the west, and the sky will get more of an orange glow. It doesn't happen much, but it definitely affects the daylight and the quality as well as the temperature.
Yeah.
So it's not as big of an issue now as it was back when we shot film, and you had to use gel filters over the lens to correct for color temperature. Now it's all done on the computer.
So that's actually really interesting. I'm not going to lie. I didn't know sun played a part whenever it came to designing buildings as kind of where do you want the sun to come in and rest throughout the year. That's really interesting and new to me. I do want to say, to add really quick about the sunsets in Okinawa, for some reason, the day before a typhoon reaches the island, the sunsets are very dramatic. The entire sky is deep red or purples and pinks and orange. It's some of the most beautiful sunsets. So every time we get those, you're like, oh, a typhoon's going to be coming in and be landfall in the next 70 up to 72 hours.
So do the typhoons come in from the west or the east?
They come in from the east. Unless you get one that comes from the south, it'll hit mainland China or the Philippines, and then it knocks it back in the eastern direction, which will then approach us from the west. It happens very rarely, but have experienced a couple of those types. Then I've experienced ones that went under us, it hit China, it came back, went over us. It was about halfway to mainland Japan, and then it turned around and it came back for a second go over us. So we had a week's long worth of typhoon.
Well, I think that's a product of the clouds that move in first. Some of them can be real dramatic. And at some point, the sun will set below the clouds and will reflect up on the bottoms of the clouds, and that may be the skies you're describing.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Those are good picture taking days, but that time doesn't last very long.
It doesn't.
It's very short lived. Yeah, it's short lived. So, part of the job is you got to kind of understand, or I've learned to kind of see what the weather's going to do, especially if I want to go take a trip that's out of town, whether it be across the state or just whatever. So, kind of have to keep an eye out on weather because my assignments are, unless it's in interiors, it's weather driven. So, it's very difficult, especially if you're a couple of days out. The weather forecasts here aren't very dependable, much more than 2 or 3, 4 days out. So it's a hit or miss.
Okay.
So, but going back to the architecture, I think the architecture and how to deal with how to design around light and shade and shadow and learn about sun angles, those were all building blocks that I was learned as an architect, but found it very easily to transfer over to photography. And I think that's why I was driven to the photography aspect of it. So there are numerous architectural photographers out there that are architects, or they've been trained as architects. First they understand the design, they can speak the lingo, and it's all about trying to have a good eye, scale, proportion. All that plays a part in how I set up a photograph. It's much different than street photography, and I think that's why I was drawn to street photography, or like pretty much what I like to do here is get in the truck and go out to small town Texas or USA and snap photographs, because it's unscripted. I see something that catches my eye, I'll stop and I'll shoot. Where architecture, you basically set up and have to wait for either people to get out of the way, or wait for the right people to get in the way, or a lot of what we're doing now in architecture is, back when I got started, we did not want people in photographs because they wanted to just show the architecture.
Yeah.
And that slowly turned, and now I have nearly every one of my clients, corporate clients, want people in photographs. And so they either bring out employees, or we borrow people that are in the facility, but we've got to get permission and all that other stuff. So that's a lot of paperwork.
Yeah. You got to get the model release for that?
Most of the time, yes, unless it's an employee.
Okay.
So I keep them standard. I've got file drawers full of them. So it's getting more and more difficult to photograph schools, just because of trying to get permission, and districts have cracked down on since the past few years of shootings and so forth. They're being not overly, but very cautious. So that's become more difficult, and some firms are actually bringing in kids on the weekends to photograph schools. It's kind of unusual, but
yeah.
Yes.
What would you say you feel is the cause of the change, where you mentioned the client, they didn't want people, but now they do? What is the desire for people in these photographs now?
Well, a couple of things is, when I got started, we were shooting film, and we were shooting 4x5, and 4x5 is extremely slow. It's slow to set up. It's slow to do test shots. And when you're dealing with available light, some of the exposures could be 3 and 4 minutes. And it's just impossible to have somebody to sit still that long. I just recently working on a project now that requires 4x5 film. And I'm shooting unfiltered because it's black and white. So shooting unfiltered, and some of the exposures on those at shooting a T-Max 100, some of those exposures are 180 seconds. So it's all empty. But I think that was one thing why there wasn't a lot of people back in the day. And then I think more recently, I think there was one magazine that really opened the door to people in shots, and that was Dwell magazine. Dwell places people in shots doing various things. They're in the kitchen, they're cooking, they're doing whatever. And I think that was appealing to a lot of architects and designers. And I know, especially from a school standpoint, that architects want children in their shots, either in a classroom, on a field playing, or a playground, or whatever. And, you know, that's important for them to sell their service to a school board or a school district. So I get it, but it's a lot of coordination and it's a lot of post-production. I spend more time behind the computer than I do behind the camera. So that's a pretty much of a normal thing now for me. Anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned 4x5 film. I have a 4x5 camera, but I cheat. And the reason why I cheat is because I don't have a facility near me that develops 4x5 film. I have this large stack from the person I bought it from, so it's probably expired and unusable at this time. But I purchased a instant film back that takes Fujifilm Instax wide, but it's the whole process is 4x5 large format. So you gotta get the cloth, you gotta focus, you gotta get you gotta set up everything. It's one of the most unique and fun experiences I've ever done, but because of how slow it takes, and it's a lot of test shots, so you're burning through the film. You could do like multiple exposures. It's a really fun process. I would like to start using it more. Honestly, I don't know why I don't, but
it's a lot of work. It's big, it's bulky. It's, you know, especially if you do like field work, it's about, you know, by the time you get your film and your lenses and the tripod and camera, it's easily 40 plus pounds. Mm-hmm. So, it's big. It's a lot of weight. So, but that's how we did it back in the day. And I'm doing a job now where it's that way again. So I had not shot film in 25 years. And, I love doing it. Well, I had been shooting 35 millimeter film for fun, but as far as professionally, no, it was completely different. Things are different now with the 4x5 world, trying to find the film, trying to find somebody to process it. And the specific job I'm doing, it has to be hand processed a certain way. It has to be hand washed a certain way. And I've got to make sure that the lab that I use, will follow these guidelines. So, or my project will get rejected. So, I think the most difficult thing is 25 years ago, you could buy instant backs for film where you just load the film in, pull the cardboard out and shoot. Or you could take the test shots with Polaroids, but they don't make that film any longer. So right now I've got to go in and shoot blind, just set the camera up, make sure it's in focus, and make sure that I've got everything that I want that's in the shot, and just make sure that I trust my light meter and bracket a handful of shots, and hopefully I got it. And so that was nerve-wracking because this was a big assignment. We're getting ready to start phase 2 here in probably another 3 weeks or so, and it will be interesting.
It's definitely an art. So even if you did it, you're still doing it. It's occurring now. It's a creative process in itself. I did kind of want to ask your entry into photography, like photography in general. Did it begin when you started architecture, or did you have like some kind of passion for photography before?
No, I never had a passion for it. I wanted to be an architect ever since I was a kid. Mm-hmm. I was always drawing buildings, drawing houses, and sketching and stuff like that, and never had an interest in photography. I think I got one year. I got a Polaroid one-step where you just push a button and the instant film comes out, and you watch it for 2 minutes, watch it develop. I was probably 10 or 11 at that point, but that wasn't even on horizon. In fact, I didn't even own a camera until I got into college. And one of our classes in architecture school was a photography 311 class, and part of the requirement for the class is so the students could put together a portfolio of their work. And this was a junior level class, and by the time you got to your senior level, then you know how to document your scale models and take photos of your drawings, and you could put together a portfolio for either that first job or going on to graduate school. And so I waited till I was a senior to actually take the class because I didn't have a camera, but you could check out cameras. And so I eventually bought a camera, and that's where they teach you about, light, shade, shadow, black and white. So it was more than a photography class. It taught you the importance of shade and shadow and how to use it and what the effects are, and printing and like developing film even. So it was a good class, but I really did not get into photography until after that. So never really had thought that I would be a photographer. So it was more of a hobby than it was anything. Go out, document buildings, old buildings. So I started doing old buildings. So that was part of the program, and it just kind of stuck. So was always impressed with looking at famous buildings by famous architects, and then actually seeing the buildings in real life. And you walk away and said, didn't look as good as it did in the photograph. And you go back and you look at the photograph again, and you realize that it was the photographer's work that made those buildings really pop out. Then I started looking at the photographers more and more. And back then there was only a handful of really well-known photographers, and just kind of learned what I could on it.
Okay. That's interesting. You mentioned a term that I want to kind of try to discuss. First time I've heard it in this sense, shade and shadows. So in the architect photography world, what is the difference of shade and shadows versus light and shadows and other photography?
Well, I sort of use shade, shadows. I see shade as the space that's inside of the shadow line.
Okay.
I see a shadow. For me, I see a shadow as that stark line that's cast across the building. And if it casts across the the ground as well, I see everything that's in that line as a shadow. Mm-hmm. And so some shadows can be very stark and very appealing. In architecture, like, you want a little detail to still show. And that's when you have to balance the light. And we do it now a lot with Photoshop or just whatever program. So shade shadow is very important to show detail.
I really like this concept because I'm a shadow guy myself. I prefer just amazing shadows, close to all blacks. So everything in the darkness realm, right? And yes. I like how you used that phrase, the space inside shadows. This is a learning experience for me because of all of my time shooting, I've never considered the space within shadows. Now, in a graphic design aspect, because I went to school for graphic design, obviously I see that as negative space. But now my paradigm is shifted and I interpret it as something completely different. Like the space that actually exists in the negative realm of graphic design is just null and void. It kind of sounds redundant or just doesn't make sense at all, but it makes sense in my head. I apologize if I confused anybody.
No, that's a good question. And it's something that I've often thought about, and I use the word shade and shadow a lot. Mm. And I had someone ask me that question years ago, and I thought, well, I better come up with a better answer. And
so you've been working on it.
Yes, because shade shadows. I really like the dark shadows. One of the things I love doing, like in my spare time, is going out and getting in the truck and driving out to wherever. And I just have fun shooting that sort of thing. I don't have to worry about what the architect's going to want to see, what he wants. Is this going to work for a publication or a design award? I just go out, and if it catches my eye, I shoot it. And getting back into film, within the past 3 or 4 years, I've really learned a lot by shooting film, and some of it can carry over back into the profession. But it's just a product of, I really like stark shadows if I'm shooting for fun, but it's not always good in architecture. Mm-hmm. So it just doesn't work in some cases. So
I would like to ask now, in a different, still kind of in the same realm of architecture, and I'm going to kind of venture down like street photography kind of subgenres. They're becoming a lot more popular now, where people are starting to emphasize architecture inside their photos.
Yes.
Kind of like fine artsy, and probably in like the proper architecture photography to document the buildings, as you mentioned. Like, some of the most beautiful images I've seen is like where a shadow, or it's probably added to, increase the shadow lines, but basically just like the shape of the shadows, just completely black, kind of form the building, like modeling light. It's modeling light, but like using other architectures, light modeling to help define another building. Basically a play on light, I would say.
There's one famous shot by Fan Ho, shot in the 50s. And it's both architecture and nature and street photography. And it has this stark shadow line. And it's black and white, of course. And half of the photo is in sunlight, half of it's in shadow. And this strong diagonal shadow line comes down across the frame. And then it hits a lady leaning up against the wall. She's in a dress. I don't remember if she's looking forward or looking down. And it's a very carefully framed one point. The lines are straight. And it's just a great both street photography shot as well as an architectural photography shot. And very stark shadows, beautiful shot. And if I'm out doing street photography for fun, I try to set up shots on an architectural. I tend to fish more than I hunt. I think is the term. I like to find a spot where there's an interesting backdrop and kind of set up the lines. And of course, I never use a tripod if I'm doing any type of street stuff. I use tripod 99% of the time for architecture. But street stuff, I just like to just find a spot and just shoot and kind of set things up, kind of set up the scene, I guess, and carefully do a composition. Now, that always doesn't work because sometimes you see some action going on and you're more interested in catching the person than you are setting up the scene. So, but in most instances, I like to set up and just wait for something to happen. So, would like to do more of that in architecture. And you know, if I'm shooting a building in a city or something like that, then I tend to do that. You got to be careful with people you get in the shot. Some people don't want to be photographed. And anyway, it's a lot of fun.
Yes. The Fan Ho shot, I do know the exact image you're referring to. I believe that's actually the first Fan Ho image that I saw where I actually learned who Fan Ho was. And that particular shot has become so synonymous with street photography and architecture that if you talk if you talk to like any photographer at the time when they're making photos, they'll say, "Oh, this is my Fan Ho moment." They connect that moment to that photograph. It's just one of those like images that everyone knows. It's a very beautiful image. Completely agree. And I wonder when he made that image, if he kind of like had a feeling that this was going to be what the world knows him for. I think it was carefully set up and staged. In fact, I think that if you go study the shot, if you look at the bottom of the shot, her feet are already in shadow, and would be interesting to know if he just off the cuffs saw that, because I doubt if she was really standing there. Would that shadow have been a little bit better 5-10 minutes before, and her feet were able to be seen in the sunlight? See, I think the shadow line was slowly creeping up the building, like when he had taken that shot. And I think shadow line's probably above the ankle. So I don't know. That'd be interesting to find out. You know, talk to these great photographers
about how those shots were set up, and I think that may be something that's missing. So, you know, to hear Ansel Adams talk about how he shot it was Moonrise. It's just fascinating that he had literally seconds to shoot that one exposure, and he went to grab a second exposure and he lost the sun, and so he had just one piece of film. And you know, I think it would be interesting to hear more people like discuss how they came about shooting particular photos. Of course, all the greats, you know, it's like they're all gone now. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent there.
No,
but yes,
I'm glad you brought that up, Ansel Adams. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah.
But I kind of like the comparison of Ansel Adams' nature and landscape photography, because it's kind of very similar, if not probably the same process minus straight lines, because nature is hard to find something straight. But the process in itself, composing, carefully selecting, you know, the subject, is very similar to architecture, I would say.
Yes. Yes. Well, I think it's trying to find the angle and then trying to find the light. And I think the magic about Ansel was he had a great eye for setting up and catching a shot. You know, I think it's fascinating that he's shooting an 8x10 camera and being able to set up so quickly, you know, especially with some of his scenes where there's a lot of storm clouds and things like that, because you don't have a lot of time. And, but then the other magic about Ansel is a lot of his magic came in the darkroom. Mm-hmm. So that's what he did with the negative. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what we're doing now with architecture. There's a lot of stuff that happens in post-production. So, but we've got to be careful. Architects want a sense of reality. And if we're shooting a building in context, you know, some clients want us to take out power lines, power poles. You have to be careful with that, because if you're trying to submit a project for a design award, part of the ethics is you have to represent the project. So you can't go in and do a lot of Photoshop work. Mm-hmm. And that's typically what I ask the client is, what are you going to do with these photos, you know, if they want me to take out a power line? So I tell them, and, you know, I suggest that if they're going to ever submit it, you know, that's fine. If it's going to be submitted for a publication, that's different than if you're trying to submit for an award. Your project, I think they sign some sort of a thing when they enter that their project is best represented in these photographs. So it's an ethical thing the architects have done. So I know several years ago, the American Institute of Architects had to address that issue with the advent of digital, and how far can you make adjustments to a photo before it's too far. And so they've addressed that, and I think for the most part it's pretty, you know, most people stick to that. So, but there are projects that I know that aren't going to be submitted where we just go out and do all sorts of stuff. So the architect they may design a building, and some of it may not be done because they've had cut budgets, but they won't sometimes ask us to go in and make these changes. So, or if you have a client come in, or a building owner, they'll come in and plop down a coat machine right in the middle of the lobby. The architect says, can we get rid of that? There's no problem in doing that. So anyway, it's all case by case basis. So
that's interesting to hear, because if I didn't speak to you directly about this, I would not have ever considered such strict rules when it comes to architect photography and submitting into projects, in the term of removing power lines and probably other stuff. Now I know, because it's the same thing in photojournalism, where the ethics on removing, they only basically allow lighting adjustments and no edits or altering the image pixels in any sense, other than, again, lighting adjustments, exposure, shadows, highlights, stuff like that. Very minor. You can't go overboard. So I guess really, and I'm going to quote, it's not like a verbatim quote, but Henry Cartier-Bresson, I read in one of his books, I believe it was Interviews, which is just a collection of interviews that he partook in, where he says everyone needs to respect the subject. And if you're a nature photographer, architect photographer, street photographer, you absolutely 100% must respect the subject. And when I read that, I kind of incorporated it into my philosophy of photography itself. And I always respect my subject, regardless of what it may be. And if anyone's wondering what the subject is whatever piques your interest and you point your lens at. Whatever your lens is pointing at is the subject.
Yes. If I am photographing for an architect and he's footing the bill, I've got to really be sensitive of the subject. So, there are some situations where it's like, okay, this isn't going to work like right now because something's going on in front of the building or something that's not flattering, without getting into a lot of details. I may have to just come back. Or come back a different time of day. And I do that a lot. If I am out taking the photos for fun, I'm out trying to do street stuff. There are things that I will not, do as far as people, but you just have to kind of weigh that. A lot of the street stuff, I'm not very experienced in street stuff. I have done some traveling a little bit, and I posted a lot of those photos, and those are great. And I wish I could spend more time doing it. So, if I take a break right now, it's just getting in a vehicle and driving. Like I said, driving out west, out to the western part of the state, or, I've got clients in Santa Fe, and that's always a great drive. So I try to drive to most of my assignments, and I will take a little extra time and stop, and if I see something interesting, and shoot. So it's not all big city stuff. It's a lot of rural stuff, and there's some interesting stuff, but I don't see a lot of people. So, took a trip a few years ago to Europe, and that was my first really getting out on the street, shooting street stuff, and it's a lot of fun. But you get a lot of interesting people out there that do not want their picture taken. And you just kind of have to deal with that. Mm-hmm. So I try to avoid it.
Do you avoid just taking any person in the streets photo, Like, what piques your interest, I guess, whenever you're doing street photography?
Well, I just think it's the activity.
Okay.
If we're shooting, well, I'm drawn to the architecture, but I'm also drawn to the lighting. If lighting is good, like I said before, is I'll set up a shot and I'll sit there and wait for something to happen. Mm. And, I'll give it a few minutes. And if there's enough people there, there's always something going on. So, I saw some street fighting going on, and I chose not to shoot any of that. And everybody was out with their camera, their iPhones,
smartphones,
taking pictures. So, so I don't do any of that. But I mean, it might be as simple as someone smoking a cigarette or something like that. I find that interesting. So, there was one street shot that I'd taken in Prague, and I had set up the shot, really wasn't paying attention to the people walking by. And I've got one lady walking down a stair going to a subway, and right on the opposite side of her up to the building is another lady carrying a garden hose and smoking a cigarette. And I really didn't catch that till I got to looking at the shot afterwards, because it was a pretty wide angle shot. And I thought, well, that was interesting to show the two opposites like that. Now, stuff like that I find fascinating, but some of those you just catch by accident.
Oh yeah, happy accidents. I like to call them
happy accidents. But like you said, you've talked about this is knowing when to push the shutter. Mm. So, if you're shooting an old camera, it's knowing when to advance the film and push the shutter. So
it's a combination, the 1-2 punch.
Well, yes, because if you shoot with an old enough camera, you got to physically wind that there's no crank. So you have to physically wind. That takes a few seconds.
The Leica 3s.
Yes, or the 2s or the 1s. So I shoot with a 1 quite a bit. I've got it.
I would like to see that process.
So I just posted something a few days ago where I shot a few seconds apart, and it's like a guy. I think he's either on a phone or I think he's smoking a cigarette. And I was out in Santa Fe, and I said, "Okay, I'm going to take this shot." And his face was sort of kind of away from sunlight, and I shot it thinking that was going to be it. And then I advanced the film again. I got to stop and crank it. And then by the time I got the camera back up to my eye, he had faced the sun. And so it's a different picture. You can see his face. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Yeah. And it was kind of an assignment. So, but if you're shooting like with an M10 or something like that, or shooting with anything that's a point and shoot, those take multiple pictures. So I shoot with a Canon like professionally, and I've got it set on the slowest setting with the filters on, and it's not a fast camera. Mm-hmm. So architectural lenses on that are all manual focus. They're not high speed. So it's not a quick, it's just the opposite from sports photography. So, let's go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. You can finish.
I was going to say that if you're shooting with zone focusing, like on a rangefinder or something like that, those can go pretty fast. So anyway, that's where I was going with that.
I was basically just going to say, I would like to just think that the reason why those lenses are a little slower is because they're developed for architecture. Obviously, the tilt shift lenses. So they know you're going to need a tripod. They know you're going to need time to set up. Like, that's the intent behind that.
Yes.
Additionally, I wanted to ask, I know Leica does not have in their current lineup of lenses a tilt shift lens or perspective lens. How do you use the M system for architect photography? I know that the actual optical viewfinder has some perspective view depending on how you use the frame lines against the building. And you can actually see the perspective really well. So I don't know how they engineered that into the system, but the perspective view in the frame lines in the Leica M viewfinder is actually pretty useful.
Well, the M10s, they have that perspective, but it's done as a software. Mm-hmm. It's a software issue. So you have to be careful with that, because once you set that to that particular mode, if you are not back far enough, when it straightens the lines up, then you can easily crop out some of the image, because when you fix the perspective, it has to crop some of the image. So I don't use the Leica much for my professional stuff. The reason being is I have clients that come out on the site with me, and I can take my Canon system and I can put a Wi-Fi on it, and I can shoot my photos to an iPad, so the client can see it instantly, and we can talk about it. We can zoom in and look at it. And Leica really isn't geared for that. Like, they've got their own app, but it's just very archaic. I know some people may use Capture One, but I'm not using any of my Leica gear really for architecture unless I don't have a client with me and it's handheld stuff such as exteriors. Now, I have taken some interior shots using the M system, but those were more or less for tests. So, but I do, if it's a nice day and I'm shooting exterior like details and things like that, I can take one M camera and about 4-5 lenses and throw into a bag and walk around the building, photograph it, either with or without a tripod. And it's a lot lighter weight, but I'm not using it that much. It's just, I use it a lot for my fun stuff. So definitely don't use the Leica film for client work. It's just not practical anymore. So, except for the 4x5 job I'm shooting, which requires film. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. But they made years ago. There was a Schneider 28 millimeter lens that you could use on a Leica M system. You had to get a special adapter, and I don't know. I know they don't make that lens anymore, but you can occasionally find them at auctions. And I just never, I'd never reached out to buy one of those. So, because with today's technology, I can shoot with a Leica M or shoot film. And if I want to fix the perspective in Photoshop, I can do that. Mm-hmm. So, it's just not necessary anymore. There's a lot of architectural photographers who've gone to the medium format camera system where they're not even using perspective lenses, but they're fixing it all in post-production. And like they get pretty good results with it. So anyway.
It's one of those instances where technology actually is serving a beneficial purpose as far as like perspective shifts, like the corrections.
Yes. Oh, yeah. But there are a lot of cameras now, I think, that are actually making the perspective correction actually done in the camera. You know, because I know that the Leica M system has that. I'm sure that Fuji will have their system. But the thing is you've got to be careful with that, because you got to make sure that you overshoot and that you have enough, enough information on crop room, and so, you know, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So, but there are new ways now where you can go in and, like with Adobe, and do the creative fill, and you can create more background. You know, you can do that post production. That's done quite a bit. You know, I'm guilty of that here and there. Mm-hmm. So, but yes, there's all sorts of things you can use to get a better outcome. But I think as far as architecture wise, you know, how true are you to what's represented? And that's very, very important to almost all the architects. Mm-hmm. So anyway.
Okay. I would like to now kind of plug your Instagram to share your architecture photography, but you also mentioned you have a separate kind of more personal photo Instagram as well. So please share your Instagrams, any social medias, Facebooks, Twitters, Flickrs. I don't know what people use these days. Any of your social media accounts that you like the listeners to be able to view your work.
Well, my Facebook and Instagram is Charles Davis, Davis Smith, Smith. My Leica Instagram is Leica_DFW. I think that's what it is. Yeah, yes, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. So, you know, I post on there, you know, projects I do for fun. Mm-hmm. You know, I try to drive to most of my assignments, and I take a few extra days. So, you know, I may stop. So my last assignment last fall, I had a shoot in Santa Fe, a couple of jobs up in Colorado, and I managed to do a job up in Wyoming. And I was gone for almost a couple of weeks, and just got in the car and loaded up clothes and camera gear and old film cameras, and I'd take my time getting to each project, and it was great. Toward the tail end of the leg, it was getting tiring, but it was great. You know, it's a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing that. So that's one great way to see the country and you know, stuff you normally wouldn't see flying.
Yeah.
But I'd love to be able to travel to Europe more and, you know, shoot some of the street stuff or over there. I had the best time in Prague, but I was having back issues. So, you know, I've had multiple spinal surgery. So, I was in a lot of pain during that time, but I managed to get out and shoot as much as I could. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say, sorry to hear about your surgeries, but I'm glad to hear that you were able to make some photography.
Yeah, because we tried to hook up before, and I was either off of one surgery or getting ready to do another one. So anyway, but we're good now.
Yeah, we finally we've been coordinating this conversation for at least 2 years now, so it's been in the making.
Yep.
Better late than never. I would like for you to, like, What advice do you have for like architect photographers, like up and coming? I'm learning a lot about this, especially I think for me, the most interesting aspect is the class of studying the sun angle. So I'm actually going to look into this because if I can plan trips around sun, that would be like super useful as a street photographer.
Well, as far as advice, I would say light shade, shadow is important. Context, um, um, learn about building materials, listen to the architect, um, try to study some of the great architectural photographers. That's how I learned so much. And uh, back when I got into it, like there were only a handful. Now, there's so many, but there's so many great ones. Learn as much as you can about architecture. And if you're wanting to be a photographer, learn as much as you can about lighting. There's all sorts of things you can learn about proportion, how to set up or compose a shot. That's all important. Learn about the business. Learn about the business of photography. It's getting more and more difficult to make a living because everybody's a photographer. I mean, the iPhone has just made photography so much easier. And so I have clients now that are shooting a lot of their own stuff for internal website, and they want me to pretty much focus on like design awards or publications. So, if you're going to get into it, learn about video because that's becoming a huge important thing right now. That's something I think I'm so late in my career that I don't think I'm going to pick up any things right now. So I do some drone work and can put together some basic drone things, but as far as making short clips and videos, but there's a lot going on out there. Architects are now wanting video of projects and interviews with clients and interviews with the building users. And all that requires different gear, different lighting, and different post-production. That's really important. So I think most of us underestimate our post-production work, or time, I should say. So that's something that's really important. So,
very, very good recommendations, advice as well. I think I 100% agree with the business aspect. Sometimes I feel like people who are really serious about photography and they want to make it a business, I don't know for certain the metrics behind it, but like how many people are actually studied business and marketing and stuff like that. Can say from working with certain individuals that this is not a business where you're just going to pick up your camera and go out and make money. You can make the best photos in the world, but if you don't have any of the skills to make it an actual business, you will go so far, whether it's not far at all or all the way to the end. You're going to need some kind of business knowledge. I will say that now.
Well, yes. And back when I was in architecture school, we go through 4 or 5, 6 years of school, and like we only have one business course, maybe 2. Mm-hmm. And I think that's whether it be architecture or photography or whatever, I think the lack of business courses or business education. I think that's huge. So hopefully that changes.
Yeah.
So
I just finished my college degree program, and that was actually,
congratulations.
thank you. It's actually for business management, but I had to take a business management class on actually doing like business operations. I mean, it's part of business, but when I went for graphic design, they don't teach you that as well.
No.
They just give you the basics of, this is how you're going to use Photoshop. This is how you're going to do Illustrator. This is how you're going to do your page layout program. At that time, it was Quark, but now it's InDesign. Adobe just pretty much ruined the world. They probably still use Quark. I don't know. That was the industry standard.
Well, that's an old term.
Mm-hmm. Industry standard?
No, Quark.
Oh, are you familiar with it?
I never used it, but I know the firm that I worked for.
Yeah,
that they used it.
That's how long ago I went to college, where we were learning page layout in Quark. So I actually made a few magazines for the assignments. Nothing special. I use InDesign now only because it's part of the Adobe, ecosystem. So
yes,
use that. So
Creative Suite.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to use it on a couple of things, so I'm not familiar with it that much. I had some help with it, and I was able to pick it up. I think if you use enough of Adobe products, you can almost wing it, I think. So I think the Adobe product that I had the most trouble with was the Premiere Pro.
Mm-hmm.
And how to stitch clips together and the fading and things like that. So I got pretty good at it for a while, but didn't use it enough, and I've forgotten it again. I mean, it's frustrating because if you don't use that constantly, you forget it.
Yes.
So that's one reason why I'm really not doing a lot of video. It's because I don't want to edit, and then I don't want to have to invest money in a lot of equipment at my age. So,
mm-hmm.
so I'm toward the tail end of my professional career. So, I'd rather do other things. So
I kind of just stumbled across, not stumbled, I don't know really. So I paid for Lightroom. I was basically only using Lightroom, and then Adobe traps you into like the upgrades. So if you just get the very basic standard version of Lightroom, it was $9.99 when I first created my subscription. Everything's going up in cost, but originally it was $9.99, and then they gave you a terabyte of cloud space, so you were paying, a decent cost. And then they changed it where you still pay the $9.99, but then they took away the terabyte cloud space, and it was only like 100 gigabytes, which you can't do nothing with nowadays because certain cameras, like that's 3 photos. So then you upgrade to the terabyte, but then they didn't have terabyte or cloud space only. You had to get the entire Creative Suite, which was like $60 plus the $9.99. And what I found out was, sorry for a long explanation, so I was paying for the Creative Suite, but then I was only using Lightroom. And then I started getting into podcast recording, and I was like, wait a minute, Adobe actually probably has audio recording, and they do. So I was in there, and I was like, oh, they do. So now I'm paying for the same cost, and I was like, oh, I'll just download that. And then I got into videos, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm paying for this subscription. Maybe they offer this. And then every time I just basically kept expanding my business model, my business venture, and everything that I'm working on collectively, they actually have all the programs that I need. So for me, it actually, now it's super beneficial, and it makes sense that I pay and I actually use all of the programs. I'm not the best when it comes to editing. I know what you mean about the Premiere. It takes me about 2 hours to stitch clear audio with the video. I just do basically cut, paste, move, slide, and that's it. I don't color grade. I'm not into like super high end production quality. Maybe one day, but for now, I like to just keep it raw, kind of like street photography. It's not a perfect. It's not always perfect. So I think it's really more the content than the post production for me.
Yeah, I think I think the Adobe Suite, yes, it's $60, 59, $60, something like that now. But if you're only using one or two items, it's not worth it. But I think, I use a couple of versions of Photoshop. I use Bridge. I use Lightroom some. So I'm not a big Lightroom processing guy. I like just Bridge and Photoshop. Do some of the Premiere Pro. I use enough to where, I really need that. So trying to buy each one separately, I mean, it's more than that now. So, but for you with the audio, yes, there's a lot of stuff you can do. And well, the magic is you can look on YouTube and learn how to do anything you want in any of those programs.
YouTube University. Saved me millions of dollars.
Yes, I know back when I got started that there was no YouTube, so there was no internet.
There was very little tutorials as well back in those days.
No.
It was Now there's everything.
No, and I went to school at Texas A&M, small college town, and if you wanted to buy any camera gear, so you either had to drive to Houston, or I subscribed to KEH, was a big deal, where KEH would mail out their telephone book looking like mailers every 3 or 4 weeks. And if you had to buy some gear, hopefully by the time you got it and you called them, it was still available.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was years and years and years ago.
Mail order products.
40 years ago.
Gotta love them.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll start wrapping this up. I do got another question for you is if you could highlight, recognize, recommend any architect, photographer, street photographer, whoever it may be that you feel does not get the proper recognition.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, architectural wise, Esto, which is Ezra Stoller. I mean, he's the godfather of architectural photography. ESTO.com, I think. I think he'd have to be the main one. There was a photographer that's a mentor of mine. His name it's Norman McGrath. He's out in New York. In fact, I talked to him yesterday. He had a big influence on me. I took one of his workshops several years ago, and he and I've stayed in touch. So, in fact, I just purchased his 4x5 camera system from him.
Nice.
He's 94 now.
Oh,
and he's
healthy.
And he still shoots. He still shoots. So,
yeah.
As far as like street guys, do shouts, to do shout outs. There's a Justin Trevine. He's out of Dallas. This time of year, he's out storm chasing. So, he's an interesting guy. He does some street stuff. He'll go up into, like, I think it's Vermont, like in the fall years, and he'll do some workshops up there. But there's a mutual friend of ours, Axel Handler. He's out of Germany. Mm-hmm. He's a street guy. He and I, chat back and forth. There's a guy that's out of Taiwan. His name is it's Silver Wang. He does some pretty decent stuff. There's a person you probably need to talk to. Her name is Wandering Cowgirl, and she may be a photographer that you want to.
I've reached out to her. Meet. I believe Gary told me about her.
Yes. She does great work. There's another photographer, Jason Lee. He's an actor. He does amazing still photos of the Southwest. So I think he does between his acting and his camera stuff, but he does beautiful work. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure I'm not sure like what camera systems he's using. I know he shoots some 4x5 stuff, but there may be a lot of 35 millimeter stuff in there. And off the top of my head, I know as soon as I get off here, I'm going to think of a dozen names. But I think those are the biggies. So, probably my biggest influence, if I had a street photographer, was one of my old employers from years ago. His name's Frank Welch. If you did a Google on him and looked at images, he's got some amazing photos of Paris, France in about 1950, 51, 52. And it was after the war. And he's got some amazing black and white. And that was really where I was exposed to street photography at first. Mm-hmm. And I had never heard of a Leica camera before I went to work for him. But Frank was a great architect and a really good photographer. So his street stuff has a lot of influence. He's been gone for several years, but I really wished someone had kept his photography website up because he's got some amazing 1950, 51, 52 stuff of Paris. And Frank wasn't afraid to approach people about photography. So, he told me some really great stories. I've got some good photos of his over the years.
Oh, that's awesome. So,
I think those are the biggies.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing. If there's anyone else you can think of after we finish and we wrap it up, feel free, just send me a message and I'll get to him.
I have one guy that comes to mind. Sam Abel, National Geographic. Never met him, but listening to him talk about photography, it will really get you inspired. Mm-hmm. So, some of his photos are great, but you have to hear him talk about photography. I think that's where the magic is with Sam. Okay. So, very good. Anytime that you get to hear him, a young photographer's really inspiring to hear him talk. So,
okay, I'll definitely.
I think that may be it.
I'll get those all added. I'll go back. I gotta re-listen and then I'll write them down and type them up. So I appreciate it. Thank you for that. Thank you for your time. As I said, we're going to wrap this up. So I want to thank the fans, listeners, and supporters who made it all the way here. I learned a lot and really excited to have had this conversation. So thank you for sharing all of that. I'm really going to look into this the study of the sun angles. So yeah, thanks.
Sunseeker.
Yeah, Sunseeker. I'm going to look at the app, but like just the actual, the concepts behind it. So yeah, I'm probably going to implement that.
So here's two really quick rules on sun angles in architecture. The sun only hits north, and of course this is North America. Of course it may be the same for you. Sun will only hit the north base of the building from about April until mid to late August. No sunlight will hit the front face, unless you're close to the North Pole. So best time to shoot north facing buildings is April to August. June, July are the best months. Those happen to be the worst months to shoot any building that faces south. because when the sun gets around to the south side of the building, by the time the sun hits the face of the south building, it's so high on the horizon, it's like 80 some degrees, like on the horizon. It's not flattering to a building. It's just too high up. So south facing buildings, best time to shoot those are in the fall months and first time in the spring. So I have clients that have me do both. So I usually hit some of my really good clients who likes to get everything published, win awards. Most of their buildings I shoot at least twice. I shoot once in the spring and fall, and maybe one in the summer. Mm-hmm. So, but that's not always possible, especially if we're flying to somewhere, or I'm driving 1,000 miles away. So, but anyway, sorry for that quick tangent. But those are two.
That's fine. I got another question just popped up to my mind. I wanted to ask earlier, and I just remembered it now. You mentioned submitting photos for awards, and it sounds like the owners of the building that commission you to take the photos, they submit your photos for awards that they win. Is that accurate?
The architects that design the buildings, not the building owners themselves.
Oh, okay.
But the architects that design the building, they do submit. And every submission process is different. They typically will put together a written description, maybe floor plans or a site plan, and then pepper the presentation with photos.
Okay.
And so, it may be a dozen photos. Each submission's different. So most architectural submissions, they will let you submit up to 12 slides or 12 pages. And some architects like to put 10 photos to a page, which is way too much. Some architects maybe do one or two. So it's all varies. And, I typically have to sign off saying yes, that I agree that they can publish my stuff and they can use it and things like that. That's kind of a standard practice and things that I do. But sometimes I do get calls from the building owners that have happened to see the shots and say, can we use some of this for our marketing material? And, most of the times, well, I don't think I've ever said no. But sometimes, I'll ask them for a fee or something like that. So, I think usage rights are very important to photographers. So, you should just make sure you get something. So,
yeah, get credited for your work. I think you clarified that. So they're using your photos for architecture-based awards, not photography-based awards.
Oh, yeah, correct.
Okay.
Yes, there have been instances like within the American Institute of Architects where they'll have a photography competition where they want you to submit your best architectural photo. And that's based solely on photography, not design. So I used to participate in those, and I've won those a few times, and then I figured, not to do that anymore. Because those are really meant for amateurs, I think.
Yes. So no, I don't mean it like that in that regard.
Yeah.
just one instant came to mind, and I got soured over it when the memory hit me. Was for the LHSA. They were doing like a photo grant, and the grant was for amateurs, and it laid it out. This is for like new beginner photographers. There was all kinds of rules and regulations, and I was like, oh, I feel like I qualify for this. Like, yeah, I'm pretty seasoned in photography, but that's just based on like technique wise. But like career wise, I would say very amateur. Never worked for a major publication or anything like that.
Well, but that's a clear difference too. So, yes.
So when they selected the winner, nothing against the winner. The winner's work was amazing, and the win was highly justified. But my biggest problem was when they announced the winner and then they listed all of the person's accolades. This person clearly was overqualified for the grant. It had like 16. This is probably over exaggerating, but she had like 16 like top level photography awards. There, like her sheet was just massive with all of her accomplishments and wins. And I was like, no one in this competition stood a chance. If you're trying to market this as a amateur grant, but then you have like the world's greatest Nobel Peace Prize photographer over here winning Pulitzers, like you got to rewrite the rules here.
Well, I think yes, and I think that they need to clarify what is an amateur.
Mm-hmm.
So it's yes, and you can blame whoever put that together, but yes, there needs to be a clear definition of amateur versus professional. Now, she may not be a professional photographer, but she's definitely not an amateur.
Yes, who definitely was not.
Well, I think you can clearly get away with that by saying published or unpublished. I think that's an easier way.
Yeah, I think so. Just rewriting the rules a little more, clarification and requirements, minimal requirements.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
Anyways, I do appreciate it. Again, this was an amazing conversation. Thank you for that. I hope the fans, listeners, and supporters were able to take away some key notes in there. I wrote some stuff down, so I know I'm going to be revisiting this episode and just kind of... I'm sorry, what was that?
No. I really... No, the only thing I was going to say is reach out to me if you need any clarification on anything. So
okay, will do. So
I appreciate it.
Any last words before we depart?
Nope.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you. And
this has been fun.
Oh, it was great. Thank you to Charles Davis Smith and the fans, listeners, and supporters on the other end. I am Ricky. This is the Leica Street Photography Collective. Thank you.